The Brooklyn Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, California after the 1961 baseball season, and they made Chavez Ravine their home, and Dodger Stadium has stood there ever since. If you're not familiar with that geography, it's a very dry desert. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History from the Weather Network in Canada. Suffice to say, rainouts at Dodger Stadium are extremely rare. Since 1962, there have been only 17, but their luck ran out this day in weather history. Legendary Dodger Stadium was built on top of the historic Los Angeles neighborhood of Chavez Ravine in Solano Canyon. If you've ever been there, it's gorgeous. The stadium has a beautiful view of downtown Los Angeles, well, at least on low pollution days. Oh, it can be epic. But because of how impossibly dry the summers are in Southern California, rainouts at Dodger Stadium are rare. I gotta believe that the fans, the players, and Major League Baseball love that. But, come on. I mean, how many episodes of this podcast have I already dedicated to lightning-triggered or wind-fueled fires that all are a normal occurrence because of how dry it is? Again, normally. Get this. Before the start of their 1976 season, the Dodgers were rained out only once. And that was against the St. Louis Cardinals on April 21st of 67, ending a streak of 737 consecutive games without a postponement at that time. And likely so many in the area were grateful for the rain for the first time in so long. They definitely were not baseball fans because baseball fans were in tears. You see, that game was scheduled to feature a Hall of Fame pitching matchup between the Dodgers' Don Drysdale and the Cards' Bob Gibson. Seriously? What are the odds? But that was far from the longest wait between rain that would call a game. Following a game against the Houston Astros that was canceled for rain on April 17th of 2000, the Dodgers would not see a game canceled for this reason for another 1,471 consecutive games, and that got us to the 2018 season. However, before that happened, today happened. Today in weather history would be the third consecutive game called off for rain at Dodger Stadium in a season that would see them go on to win their first World Series in 7 years, and one that will be immortalized for that legendary early series walk-off home run by the very injured Kirk Gibson. That was sports. Up next, the weather story. But first this. Remember that this day in weather history can be enjoyed a number of ways. Right now, you are listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider, but there is also the daily podcast video short. They are shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective, and oftentimes they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened, in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. Let's paint the picture for you here, because it is important we know this so that what happened here is fully appreciated for how improbable it truly was. By the time the Brooklyn Dodgers became the LA Dodgers and set up camp here, they would play their first 410 games at Dodger Stadium before it saw its first rainout. Then there was that streak that followed that I mentioned earlier, but then the club went again from 1988 to 1999 between rainouts, and that would end after a streak of 856 games that was the Major League record before the current streak I'm talking about today. The rain started on April 19th, and by the time April 21st of 1988 had passed, the Dodgers had suffered 3 consecutive rainouts. As mentioned off the top of this episode, the Dodgers have only had, as of this writing and this podcast, 17 rainouts. Over half of those have happened in the month of April. That's in the history of the LA Dodgers. Ooh, and fun fact, 6 of the team's 17 rainouts at Chavez Ravine have been against their neighbors to the south, the San Diego Padres. And that included these 3 games in a row in today's story. It happened in a desert. This day in weather history. Hey, do you like the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. If you have an idea, go right now to wherever you're listening to me and rate us if you would, please. It's on a 5-star system, and we would love as many stars as you can afford. So rate us, but then also review us. This way we can always stay on top of how you'd like to see the show evolve. then remember to subscribe to this podcast. Click the subscribe or follow button right there on the very same podcast homepage you're listening on. You'll be immediately reminded that the next day is ready to listen to, and you also have access to every episode in the archives. It dates back to June 1st of 2020, so there is a lot that we got to get caught up on this day in weather history. Tomorrow is April 22nd, and this marks the first ever Earth Day. You can bet at my parent company, The Weather Network, we will have a lot to say about this, so if you can, check us out on TV or online for that. But right here on this podcast, I will dial back the hands of time to April 22nd of 1970, when millions of Americans, including students from thousands of colleges and universities, staged rallies, marches, and educational programs, and it lives on today. We will look back at its humble beginnings and how it actually came about on this day in weather history with me, your host, Chris May.